All right. Good evening. Hope that everyone is doing well. I was kind of messing around with a few settings here just in the last few seconds prior to the stream starting. So hopefully everyone can hear me and that I didn't cut off my audio here while I was messing around with stuff. Uh, but anyway, yeah, again, hope that everyone's having a good evening, depending on what part of the world you're watching from. So I have somebody from Germany, which I think it's like 1 o'clock in the morning there right now, which is pretty crazy. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. This past year, I was talking on a live stream the other day about how kind of neglected the Civil War content this past year, which is something that I'm looking to rectify in 2025. Going to have a little bit more Civil War content than what I did in 2024. But one of the places that has kind of served as a center of gravity for me and for thousands of others in the history world is Gettysburg. I'll go here and I'll go there, but it's kind of like all roads end up leading back to Gettysburg. And as a matter of fact, I did a series on the Battle of Gettysburg. It's been a little while ago, but that in the history of this channel was kind of one of the, I guess you could say, shots of adrenaline for the channel. Had a lot of people come in. So this is a battle and a town that means a lot to a lot of people. And this evening, we have a couple of guests who are going to be joining us. And 20 seconds before it started, they said, "What are we going to talk about?" And I said, "I don't know. We're just going to talk about Gettysburg." So first, I want to bring in my buddy Matt Cowrie, who is the, I guess you would say the what would you call yourself? Like the godfather of the addressing Gettysburg, or the
No, I would never call myself that. Others have, but I would never do that.
So Matt has a podcast that is outstanding called Addressing Gettysburg that, in my opinion, is one of the go-to sources. I should say it started off as a podcast, expanded into YouTube, which, by the way, has really taken a little bit of a leap in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, somebody told me once you hit 10,000, it grows more rapidly than it did to get to that 10,000 subscribers. And they're not wrong. I think last I checked, we were just tickling the chin of 15,000. So
yeah, that's just been the past couple of weeks that it went from 10 to 15, right?
Yeah, I don't remember when it went to 10, but it was within the last week or two. And then Saturday, it went from 10,100 and something to 11,400 and something overnight. And then now we're almost at 15,000, and I don't know what I did.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that. I mean, just with my own channel is like I kind of just go out there and make content, and then I can't explain. If I could explain it, if I could put my finger on it, I would do it over and over again. But every once in a while,
I can tell you what people like about your stuff is, well, first of all, it's well shot, which helps a lot. But also they like you. You're a very approachable guy. And that's that's the one thing I hear people say, like, I just like JD's, like, he just seems very down to earth and everything. And it's true. And I tell them, well, you should meet him in person. He's a real wild man, but you're not. No, and you are who you are. And that comes across. Like, you can't fake that for too long. Sooner or later, you, unless you want to show all the cracks, you could do that too. But yeah, so that's it. And then also the content, the stories that you choose to tell, the way you tell it visually, and the things that you find interesting and want to share with everybody. It's just, I was doing a video today on my Patreon account for the patrons, and I was saying, I want to get back in touch with doing this as like a grassroots thing. And
Mhm.
I mentioned how, you know, I could try to get a seat at the table of all these like big institutions and stuff, but they only really, they let you look at the table, but they don't let you at it. And because they have an old fashioned mindset, which is kind of in my mind, because of the internet, because of podcasts and YouTube channels, this mindset of like, here's my little piece of the pie, and I'm going to, deflect anyone who wants to come near it, is kind of outdated. And so the internet and podcasters, and I don't know what we'd call, like, what the general term for like people like us
Yeah, I
are,
don't know.
independent media people.
Sure.
Um, we work together.
Yeah.
And, like institutions, whether they be nonprofits or corporations or even the government, like National Park Service, they're competitive and they're territorial, whereas we're not. Like
Right.
we watch and listen to each other's content. We go on it. We help each other out if possible. There's no sense of, well, like, no, I'm not going to do that because that's only going to help him get bigger and everything. No, it all helps us all, and we all get that. And so there's a grassroots type of a feel to what you're doing, and hopefully what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
hope that's what it feels like, but definitely what you're doing. It's just very real,
Well, yeah,
and that's
that's
like,
something I was going to kind of touch on is like your podcast to me is very accessible. So have we done a live stream together on here before? I can't remember.
not here. We did the one where I took over. We did it from my studio, and I took over your account, and we did a show from there.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I've had you on my show many times. This is the
Yeah.
first time we've done this.
Okay. So maybe kind of give
Thank you
a
for
little
it.
bit of a background to addressing Gettysburg. Like how did this thing get started, and what is it?
It's a good question. I'm still trying to figure out what it is. So I have always wanted to get into mass media, mass communications. I love talking to people, and I don't know, there's something magical about it. And so I've tried my whole life in various ways to do that. But it finally, everything kind of came together when I said, well, why don't I do that with Gettysburg? Because that's my other love is history, and especially the Battle of Gettysburg. And I moved down here twice. My second time I moved down here to do the podcast. And the funny thing is, which this might be relevant later, my initial plan was to do the podcast to study for the licensed battlefield guide exam. Sitting and reading and taking notes is just like, it's funny. In my old age, I developed kind of ADD. And now that I don't have to be in school anymore, I try not to do anything that reminds me of school, with all due respect to you as an educator. And so I said, well, let me do podcasts. I'll interview historians and licensed guides about the battle. And then when it comes time to study for the exam, I'll just go back and listen to them all. And I'll put them out there. And if anybody else likes it, good for them. We'll all learn about it together. And I did, and people ended up liking it, which surprised me because I had 4 or 5 podcasts before that nobody could give a rat's ass about. And so next thing you know, it became a business. And the irony of it all is I can't remember a damn thing that I learned about on any show, because it turns into having to make the next show. Like, I do a show at 10 a.m. By noon, I'm done. Usually I have another one at 2 to record. And I got anything I have in my head from the 10 o'clock has to be expunged, and 2 o'clock has to come in. Then you have the whole meeting with accountants and lawyers and doing the books and meetings with other people. And you can't learn. You actually end up learning how to do a business and put out shows. So, but that it started in 2018. And I want to tell the story of the Battle of Gettysburg,
Mhm.
and I want to tell it in creative ways and in fun ways. It's fun to learn this stuff.
Very
I
much.
get a thrill when I learn new things. or I visited a new place, and I want to share that with people, and not just say, point the camera at something and say, look, here's a new place I visited, but tell you what it is that tickles me about it. Right. And so I want to experience things, and I want to share it with people who are interested in learning, because there's so much to this one battle, this one town, that it's not just the Civil War.
Yeah, it's so the first time that I visited Gettysburg, it was with my family. We were on vacation, and a lot of people have these stories about when they went to Gettysburg as a kid, and their parents took them, stuff like that. It's not my story. I was well into adulthood before I visited Gettysburg for the first time, and the first visit was overwhelming, because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about this battle. And the more that I've learned about it, it's like the saying that my dad has: the more you know that you don't know.
Correct.
And that's kind of what I get from your podcast. So it's kind of like a two lanes going down the same highway is how I would describe your podcast. You have the Thursday show, which is
right.
kind of like a radio show with
right.
Talking about local stuff, and then you also have this stream where, like, you bring in the best and the brightest who are like experts on the Battle of Gettysburg, and like most documentaries you watch, and the Civil War in general. So a lot of stuff Gettysburg, you're going to learn about like the top level stuff, but like your podcast, it's like having a PhD class where you're constantly bringing in like the top tier lecturers, and like one of them's going to do a talk on this regiment or this general or that, and like it's dense, but it's also at the same time very, very accessible.
Dense is the word that my teachers used to describe me in school. So I'm glad you notice all of that, because there are three streams. Let's use that word. There's our free feed, which the big history show on that is called Ask a Gettysburg Guide, and those come out twice a month. And that one, I really designed that because, or to put the audience in touch with licensed battlefield guides, many of whom they've heard of because they're in videos, or they're on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I have access to them, because prior to doing this, I owned a tour company here, and I employed guides. And so through them, I've met others. And also, I'm just not afraid to go up to somebody and say, hey, I do the show. Would you like to come on and talk about it? Whatever,
Sure.
So the idea there is that you can ask the guide a question about a given topic. Now, our second stream is related to that, because you have to be a patron on our Patreon channel to know what the topics are ahead of time and submit questions, so that when we record, I can ask them on the show. But Patreon also has its own content, and we use Scott Hartwig, who has these two great books out about Antietam, called To Antietam Creek and I Dread the Thought of the Place, which are enormous tomes. They're like big steaks, like the thickest, juiciest steaks you've ever seen, but they're fantastically written. And Scott's like, one of my history heroes, because I grew up in the 90s watching the History Channel when it showed history, and
Sure.
He was always on the Civil War shows. And so, and then I got, and then when I moved to Gettysburg, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's here. And like, that's so cool. And yeah, whatever. So, but like, we had him on early on, and I knew his wife through work, and I just asked, can you get Scott to come on? And he did it, and it was great. And so you get all these people, and so we have them on Patreon. That's what I was talking about. I lost my train of thought there. So okay, so Patreon. So Patreon.
By the way, folks, this is kind of how the podcast goes as well.
Exactly.
It's awesome.
It's like inside the mind of a madman. So Scott, the reason I brought him up was because he once said that the Battle of Gettysburg is the gateway drug to the Civil War.
100%.
And then I've since added to it that the movie Gettysburg is the gateway drug to the Civil War. But so we lure you in with our Ask a Guides. And if you're brave enough, you go to our Patreon channel, patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, and you become a patron. And there you can get, depending on your level, up to 4 episodes a month. And we don't stick to Gettysburg over there. We use Gettysburg as the springboard to explore the Civil War. And we don't just go to other battles. We focus on the cultural, the societal, economic, political. And as like you're saying about what your dad said is, the more you know, you don't know, or whatever.
Yeah.
As I realize what I don't know and where my deficiencies are, I then seek out guests to bring on to teach me something. And then the hope being that maybe the audience hasn't heard of this stuff either. And so I have accessibility to different people and different things that I'm willing to use for the betterment of the audience. And then the other thing you're talking about, the third thing, is called AG Today, Addressing Gettysburg Today. And that has 3 purposes. One is to keep me sane, because when you talk about death and destruction and slavery and all these horrible, horrible things day in and day out, sometimes more than once a day, if you're in any way empathetic, it wears on you. And so you have to laugh. And so that's one of the reasons we do AG Today. The other reason is I used to do like housekeeping on in the first 10 or 15 minutes of a history show. We got this going on, we got that going on, and people would go in the comments on YouTube and they'd be like, they'd put a timestamp. It's like 15 minutes and 15 seconds before they get to the history. And I was like, okay, I get it. You don't care about being a part of a community. You just want to hear the information, and that's fine.
Which is cool.
Yeah. And so I created this other show to get all of this for the community that we've built, because we do like in-person stuff too. And then the third reason is we got you in with the Ask a Gettysburg Guide shows. You're now really interested and fired up in learning more about Gettysburg, and maybe this has compelled you to visit. Well, where do you go to eat? Where do you go to sleep? What tours do you take? What are other things that you can see within an hour drive of Gettysburg that are just as interesting, just as fascinating, entertaining, whatever the case may be? So that's what we do with AG Today, is we talk more about what's going on in Gettysburg now, and kind of feature local businesses, local institutions, and events and things like that. So it's a big freaking undertaking here. And honestly, I don't know how I haven't lost my mind yet.
It's good stuff. And
Thank you.
Gettysburg is the most visited battlefield, I would say.
I thought I heard like Kennesaw Mountain, but I think that's because people go jogging.
It's because people go walking there.
Yeah, but still, a body is a body, and they're still counting them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe Mike would know later.
As far as like tourism goes, I would have to say that Gettysburg is number one. So I mean that's honestly how I found the podcast. Was
how did you find it?
I don't know. I think I went on I think I went on iTunes or Apple Podcast and just typed in Gettysburg, and I found you guys and Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
No, say it for real. For real.
Yeah, Battle of Gettysburg podcast with Tim Essler and Eric Lindblade, which it's everybody's friends there and everything. So
yeah.
But anyway, it helped me to kind of prepare, to get ready for when I came back and wanted to kind of get serious about Gettysburg. Now, I don't remember the circumstances surrounding the first time I came on the show. I don't know if I reached out and just said something about the podcast and then you invited me on, or whatever the case was.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. So for people who may not know, uh, the current location of the Addressing Gettysburg podcast is at the Gettysburg Museum of History. It's this nice studio. I mean, if you
Air
can see it
conditioning.
online and everything like that, it's really, really nice. The prior home of the Addressing Gettysburg podcast was a shed, a, a literal shed.
Yes.
So I show up to this shed. I go in there, and it's the size of a shed, like what you would pick up at Lowe's. Nice setup inside. And I don't even remember what we talked about as stuff with the YouTube channel and stuff like that. But there were a number of other guests that day.
Yeah, we were all cramped in.
Yes, there were legitimately like 8 or 10 people in there. At the end, the former producer Eric, I remember at the end he hit the off switch and he said, "We're never doing that again." But
we did it many times afterwards.
Yes. one of the guests that day, someone who has become a regular on the show, and this gentleman, we're all crammed into this shed studio, and he gets up to the microphone, and Matt starts asking him questions, and this guy starts talking about like all of the accidents that he has had and the various ways that he has hurt himself like within the past month, and like all of these things that he was going through. And that was this gentleman right here, Mike 6 Questions Lentz.
Oh, thank you, JD. Yes, it's a minor miracle I'm still alive.
So Mike Lentz is a regular on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast and is nicknamed 6 Questions Lentz. Now, I can imagine how that name came about, but can you explain that nickname?
Well, yes. Going back to the tier system that old Matt talked about. I became a patron of Addressing Gettysburg after finding Addressing Gettysburg on Apple, and also running into him at the Winter Lecture Series. I was the weird nerd in the front row, and he was the weird guy with the recording device next to me. So
the other nerd, yeah.
Yeah. And so what happened was I became a patron, and this was very early days in that, and he sent out a blast for we would need questions for an Ask a Guide. And for me, I'm studying to become a licensed battlefield guide here at Gettysburg. I moved out here from Colorado in 2019 for that purpose.
Oh,
and
I
so
didn't know
went, hey, this is fantastic. I can send questions to a guide about the subject matter I'm studying. Look at that. And so what I did is I put together, thinking that no one else would send any questions, I put together 8 multi-part questions and said, use as many as you want or none at all. But these are usually questions I usually know the answer to it.
Uh-huh.
And I know the story behind it. I just want to hear what their take is on it.
Yeah.
And I think it will also help the show. So that's usually my motivation for asking those questions. And so I sent that in. And eventually doing that enough times earned me, from Matt, the nickname 6 Questions.
Well, apparently the 6 Question fan club has showed up on the stream tonight. Like you popped on and all of a sudden the chat just exploded.
Yeah. D's nuts looked really happy that 6 Questions is here. D's nuts.
So one thing that I really appreciate about Mike is, well, there are many things. One, that as he mentioned there, he asks questions that
he knows the answer to.
It's a very, yeah, like I said, I already kind of knows the answer to, but it's not to make himself look good. Like he's always thinking about other people. Very humble guy. So,
Yes.
so Mike, I hope I don't like embarrass you here. You know, complimenting you. I'll try and limit it. And then also,
well, get
like
out of the way. Then we'll do the nasty part later. So.
Yeah. And then when I've heard him ask questions, my thought is, my gosh, I don't even know enough to have asked that question. Like I don't even have the foundational knowledge to have asked that. So anyway, it's like I said, he's a regular on the show, and
it's kind
really
of funny though. Sorry to interrupt you. It's kind of funny that he, like the listeners, it's almost like a sport to watch and see what questions Mike comes up with. Because I think everybody knows that he's asking questions that he knows the answers to.
Yeah.
But they may not, like you're saying, know enough to ask those questions themselves. And but they do know enough, but they haven't thought of it. And then
Right.
it's kind of like, yeah, that's a good question. And then the guides, like when I'm asking the question, if I look up from the page across at the guide, like you could see like somewhere at some point in the question, some will get a little smirk and they'll be like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And but it's very helpful though.
Well, I would imagine that even with that, like I don't consider myself an expert in any one thing. It's like I know a little bit about a lot of things, but not a lot about one thing.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to call it, I know enough to get myself in trouble, but not enough to get out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
But even if I go and ask somebody who is an expert in a subject, who really knows something well, like for example, let's take like a Paul Woodage from World War II TV, who is the best there is when it comes to Normandy. I could go and ask him a question about a part of the Battle of Normandy that I know well, but his answer is going to have way more in it than
you asked for.
It's going to add to my base of knowledge as it is. So Mike, we're sitting here and we're yapping about licensed battlefield guides. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I discovered after visiting Gettysburg, and I went out with a licensed battlefield guide. It is Eric Lindblade, as a matter of fact, who I went out with. I started going to other battlefields. Like I wanted to go to Shiloh, and I wanted to go here, wanted to go there. I was like, oh, okay, well, I need to go get a licensed battlefield guide at those parks as well. And then realized that like other battlefields don't have that. This is something that is really kind of unique to Gettysburg. So could you kind of walk us through like what the heck is a licensed battlefield guide?
A licensed battlefield guide is kind of an independent contractor who is licensed by the National Park Service or federal government. You have to go through an exam process in order to get that license, but once you do, you will receive a badge and you'll be able to conduct tours on the battlefield at Gettysburg. They've been doing this since 1915. It's been federally put in place that have guides to be licensed by the federal government. To become a guide, you just can't simply fill out an application. You have to go through a 5-tiered testing system, which includes a rigorous written exam, and it culminates in an oral exam, which is basically taking a supervisory ranger and a guide around on a 2-hour tour. If you fail any of those tiers, you have to go back to the beginning. And they call those tests only when they need more guides. So it's not a regular thing. And so this is the elite of battlefield guiding when it comes to the United States in the Civil War. You have to be the best to be there, to give the guests, to give the people who are visiting for the first time the best experience possible. Now, so when you go out there to the battlefield and you see these guys with blue button-down shirts, ladies and gentlemen, blue button-down shirts and gray slacks, they got there the hard way and they know their stuff. I've never had a bad tour with a licensed battlefield guide.
So is it basically is everybody giving the same tour of the battlefield? You said it's a 2-hour tour. So is it something that can be customized or
And it's often customized by the visitor themselves. What are they interested in? Where do they come from? And so you will go through the regular progression, the chronology of the battle, but every tour is going to be different because of the person that you're dealing with. You're not there to show them how much you know. You're there to show them this field and connect them to this place. So that's your responsibility as a guide. And so it's an amazing responsibility, because this is the gateway to the rest of the Civil War battlefields. If they have a bad experience here at Gettysburg, who knows if they're going to go to Antietam? Who knows if they're going to go to Chickamauga? And so it's one of those things where there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure to do your job and do it well as a guide here at Gettysburg.
Okay, and so you talked about the written exam, which they just had. Well, it was December 7th, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
Arbor Day. Yeah,
It's very much a date that will live in infamy.
Very much so. Yeah.
When was the last time that they had one of these exams? Because you said that it only comes up as needed.
2017.
2017 was the last one.
So last one.
Can you guys explain what this written test is like? Because the understanding I have is it's I would like to take it myself just to see how I do. I would do terrible.
So,
but I would love to take. Can you explain what because supposedly this is a monster of a test.
All right. So I did, my philosophy was the same as yours, just to see. And mainly because I knew I didn't have the time to prepare for it because of doing the show. Like I was saying before, like it becomes about something other than learning. And so I went in there and I said, if I can get a 50%, I would consider that respectable, given the fact that I'm learning through osmosis. I'll tell you what I got at the end of the discussion. Okay. But here's the thing, though. I'm glad I did it because Mike says, they give them when they want to give them. So I may never, might be another 10 years before they give them again. So I wanted to take it to demystify what the test is all about, because they change it all the time. So it's never, so a guy that passed it, 10 years ago or whenever, his experience was probably different than ours, or maybe not. Somebody took it 30 years ago. Absolutely. His experience was different than ours. So you really don't know until you try. So I went in there and I said, let's see what I got stored away somewhere in here. And my brain is more like a bowling ball slathered in Vaseline. Nothing really sticks in it anymore. The wrinkles are all gone. So not much was there. But I no longer have to wonder what the experience is like, right? And it also answered a question in my head. Do I actually want to be a guide? And as you'll find out, or not even a matter of want to, because like I've taken people around, right? I've been on hundreds of tours by virtue of my old business. So I've seen really, really, really good guides giving tours, and they all do them differently. And so I know little things to show and little tricks and things like that. But in order to get to that point, I have to jump through all these hoops that are unnatural to me. So I'm a people person. I'm not a book person. I'm not a test person. I'm not a school person. I like people. I can relate to people. I'm about the human experience. Numbers, dates, they're important. I used to be better with them, but that isn't the story. The story are the men, the women, the people, even the animals in some cases that make the tapestry of American history, or history in general, colorful and beautiful. And so I had to go and say, and so it answered the question in my head: am I a guide? And if this is the criteria, no, I'm not a guide. But now at the age of 22, but maybe when I'm 50 or 55 or something like that, maybe then life will be different and I will be able to devote the time. And Mike will be able to tell you like what the next step would be and next few steps will be and why like I can't devote the time to that. So the answer would be if I had gotten a better grade than my 50%, maybe I did. Yeah. But if I had gotten to the point where I was getting a call like, hey, you got to move on or not? I think the answer would have been no. But at least now I know. And the test is what taught me that. Michael,
okay.
Go ahead.
Mike, what was your prep like for this thing?
Well, part of it was listening to podcasts like Addressing Gettysburg. And of course, also the Battle of Gettysburg podcast as well. I didn't hear Matt beep on that time. Well, slow there, Matt.
I was swallowing my water.
That's why I said it then. Okay, so, you know, at the very least, we get a choking sound, and that would be interesting onto itself. But anyway, I came out here about 5 years ago, and I kind of just went deep immersive. Took the recommended reading list from the last test, which is like 70, 80 books, and just started knocking those out. I went to every tour I could go to. I went to every battle walk I could go to. I went to every lecture I could go to. And then, of course, the best teacher is the field itself. Getting off the road and getting into the weeds is sometimes the best things you can do to really cement that what you are learning, what you're reading on the page. And so I spent hundreds of times going to Gettysburg and just walking the field and understanding what that terrain looks like. And we're blessed, 6,000 preserved acres here at Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. And yes, all of it's not exactly the way it looked like back then, mm-hmm. but they've done a pretty good job of maintaining it. And so when you read an account from a Georgia soldier that said they walked down into a bowl and the hills around them opened up with artillery fire, you can walk down into that same terrain and look up and go, oh, all right, there you are. And so it was really a lot. Looking back on it, it was a lot of studying to do this test. And sure. This test deserves it because, whoa, I want to become a licensed battlefield guide because I don't want to do that again.
So tell me, what are some examples of, are you allowed to say like what some of the questions were?
Oh, certainly, I can.
Well, why don't we ask him, Mike, the most important question?
Yeah.
What? JD, go ahead, ask him. You know. You don't know?
What's the most important question?
All right, the most important question on the exam, JD, was what is the name of the legislation that made relic hunting illegal, and in what year was it passed?
That was a question.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
So what year? Come on, JD.
So let me. I will say. Name of it? I'm going to say that let me give you a year first. I'll guess a year first. I'll say 1978 is going to be my year that I'll guess.
Okay.
And
nobody knows.
We'll call it the American Battlefield Antiquities Preservation Act.
Oh, you looked it up.
But going back to the
wait,
test,
hold up. What was it?
I don't know.
It was it was something like the Antiquities Act. Yeah, and it was
something to that nature. Of fact,
78 or 79. I'll Google it.
To be honest with you, what guest is going to come up to me and say, do you know the federal law in 1978 that prevents bullets from being taken off the battlefield?
It was really 1978? Holy cow, that was a good guess.
Yeah, that was. I mean, it went into effect in 1979. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was questions like that. But that's the thing also, too, is that's also a part of the experience as well. You can't just go out there with a metal detector and pick relics off the battlefield. So every one of the questions, though they be hard and the most important question, I can make an argument for each one of them. There are about 180 fill-in-the-blank questions where every blank was a point. Now, to give you an idea of how many points were available in the fill-in-the-blank section, 385 every blank was a point. So you would have questions that had one blank. And then you'd have questions that had 27. And you had to fill it out, including, for example, corps badges and color of corps badges, corps, division, commander. That was the 27 one. Or how about the Pickett's Charge question? Correctly place the brigades in Pickett's Charge in formation and the commander at the beginning of the assault by last name of each of those brigades.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, that's just an example of some things that were on that test. And then there were other questions that were like, here's this monument right here in this picture. Which monument is this to? Like, for example, the 7th New Jersey.
Of all the things for you to pull out of frame, that's I was like, what the hell? Okay. Sorry.
The 7th New Jersey. Who's the barn in the background? What farm is that? What's the road behind the camera, the avenue? What's that called? And who is the commander of the regiment of the 7th New Jersey?
Wow.
Who was mortally wounded at that location?
Yeah, see, this is the kind of stuff that I would just get smoked on. So,
yeah,
I mean,
but
like,
it's fun though. It's
yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
No, it is.
It is.
It was fun to go in there. First of all, you know, we're all waiting out in front of the building in the morning, and there's 140 something of us. A lot of us knew each other, and so it was nice to just there was kind of a sense of relief. Like, okay, we're finally here. Now all we have to do is go through it, and you know, whatever. What I thought was funny though, about 12 people came up to me and introduced themselves, and they said, you know, thank you for doing the show. It really helped me study for this. And and so we're inside and we're taking the test, and there's like 4 questions, and every time I finish reading I go, oh, we just did a show on that this year. What's the stinking answer? I can't remember the answer, right? Okay, move on. By the time the 5th question came, I started giggling like a maniac. Okay. And the guy next to me, I knew the guy next to me. He looks over and he's just kind of like, what are you doing? And I just start laughing because I'm like thinking of those people that came up to me outside, and I go, those bastards are going to do better at this than I am. I did the show. I can't remember it. They will remember it because they listened to it. I don't remember. And we did the shows this year. It wasn't like, 4 years ago we did a show on it. No, this year we did a show. But it was fun.
So I'm kind of similar in that regard. I've had, opportunity to be able to travel to some pretty cool places and, talk Civil War, a little bit Revolutionary War, World War I, World War II. And I do, when people ask me, about, something, I describe to them what it's like for me learning this stuff. And I describe it as like a binge and purge learning. So if I'm getting ready to go like to the Arras battlefields for World War I, man, I'm just reading tons of books and I'm getting all kinds of information in my head. And then when I go there and I'm filming it, I vomit all of that information out.
Yep.
And then when I move on to the next thing, like if I'm going to like now Guadalcanal, all the stuff that I learned about Arras has kind of been pushed to the side. And it takes me a while to access that, and I'll have to like refresh my memory. So if I were to go back to Gettysburg now, like I would probably struggle to, recall a lot of the things that I knew even 2 years ago.
Do you have people like come up to you? Sorry, Mike. Let me ask him this, and then I'll turn it over to you. Do you have people come up to you and like say just whatever, make some reference to a video you did or something like that, and then does it like surprise you, like, and not that they do it, but that you're like, really, I did that?
Yeah.
Do you ever, yeah, all the time, right?
There'll be things that people will bring up that I don't recall. Like I'll have to go back and watch my own video to, well, a friend of mine is over in the Bastogne area right now, and he sent me a text the other day, or he called me, and he said, "Hey, I'm at the place where the tank in Bastogne was taken out. Was it a German Stug that hit it?" And I was like, I think so. So I had to like kind of go back because I'm in Guadalcanal mode right now, so I had to go back and dig that up. But anyway, Mike, what were you going to say?
For me, I think looking at this test, it's properly difficult. I studied for 5 years, deep immersive, moved out to Chambersburg to do this, visited the battlefield hundreds of times, annoyed Matt with my questions dozens of times.
No.
And still, I would go into that test and I would flip the page and there would be a question that I'm like, I have no idea. No idea the answer on that. Yeah. And I would like, okay, move on. That's fine. Turn the page. There's 2 answers I don't know. Oh, great. Fantastic. This is going well. Turn the page. Oh, 3 answers. This is getting better. Yeah. And it's just one of those cases with this test where you had to stay constantly emotionally invested and in the moment, because if you let yourself spiral and say, oh man, I'm not doing great, I'm doing horrible, I'm bombing this, then it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
You have to stay right where you are and in that moment. And for me, I mean, sometimes you will get an answer to one of the questions later on in the test. For me, one of the questions was the attack on Culp's Hill on July 2nd. What's the division front attack? Well, spelling of the commander counts. You have to spell it correctly. So I'm going George Maryland Stewart and his brigade. I forgot how to spell Stewart. So I just flipped the page. I skipped that one, flipped the page. And sure enough, in July 3rd, there was George Stewart in a question. I went, all right.
Yep.
Flip back, spell that out.
That's funny. Go ahead.
Here's a question that just, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What was that?
No, go ahead. Continue.
So that was the thing, is you had to stay in, but that was so mentally and emotionally exhausting after you got done. I mean, I got out of it, and Matt famously said on the recap video that I came up to him looking like I had pooped in my pants.
I don't think I said that.
I mean, I was ashen. It was. He asked me, and I went. I shook my head. I went, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how I did. And then I went, I think I did okay. But it was tough. And then if you didn't like that, if you didn't get enough of that punishment, of the fill in the blanks, the afternoon section was 3 one-page essays.
Yeah.
They had to be 1 page, no more. 1 page. And handwriting counted. So if it was illegible, disqualified. So that was the thing.
Because you also have to do that on a tour, is you have to write an essay for your tourists.
Yeah, exactly. Hell, give me 30 minutes and I'll give you an essay there, guests. No,
that's the last half hour of your tour is supposed to be an essay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here was a question. Was there anything that you overstudied, like who was the quartermaster for Hancock or anything? So was there anything that that either one of you studied too much for, and then took the test and you're like, well, dadgummit, they didn't even ask about that?
Yeah. Plenty of those. One of them is the parts of a cannon. I didn't need to know that.
Yeah, you didn't really.
The loading in 9 times. What's loading in 9 times? Mm-hmm. Didn't need to know that. So there were, and I went, well, how about that? I didn't really spend that much time in doing that, did I? But they did ask the order of secession, the states in the order that they seceded from the Union. So as much as you prepare, you might be preparing for like 10,000 questions. They might only use 200. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is about luck. Did you study the right thing? Right? In that case, I didn't need to know the parts of the cannon. I didn't need to know what the knob was on the cannon. Quite honestly, I'm glad I don't remember now. So yeah. But the issue is you had to be somewhat lucky in what you studied for it to show up on the exam.
Yeah, that was the problem. Like, there's no course that you can take. There is a reading list, but when you would ask somebody who knows, the best answer you would get would be just study everything. And I guess for me, it wasn't that I overstudied. It was that I paid too much attention to just the battle. Not so much other battles, unless they were related to Gettysburg, like, Chancellorsville, then you go to Gettysburg and all the small ones along the way. Because again, I'm thinking that I'm being tested to see if I can take people around the battlefield for 2 hours and engage them and inform them. But that, as Mike said before, it's like, what'd you say? It's appropriately difficult. Yeah. It is. And I think that's to weed people out. And I do believe that you need to have a firm understanding of how Gettysburg fits into the war and then what happens after the war, because you got to put Gettysburg, you got to make Gettysburg make sense to somebody today. Why should I care about this today? It's 162 years ago coming up on. So like, what does that matter to me today? Well, Gettysburg's part of this war, the Reconstruction, and Reconstruction is where the shit really hit the fan, and everything that we think is crazy today basically comes out of Reconstruction. You wouldn't say the shit hits the fan on there.
No. But to give you some perspective here, looking at the breakdown of the points, the Battle of Gettysburg, day 1, day 2, day 3, accounted for 168 points of the 385 total. So less than half concerned the battle itself. So if you studied just the battle, if you overstudied that, and you didn't study the context, you didn't study the causes of the war, the consequences of the war, tactics, miscellaneous things about the war, other battles, commemoration of the battlefield, licensed battlefield guide history, the National Cemetery. If you didn't study any of those things, you're done. Wow. You're done. You're not going to make it through.
If you don't know who the current Secretary of the Interior is, you're done.
That's true. And the director of the National Park Service.
Yeah,
who is Charles Sams III. I'll never use that information anywhere else ever again, but there he is.
Who is going to go on a tour and want to know that?
Right. And by the way, not for much longer. So like, it's like, it doesn't, why would you ask that right before a new administration? Who cares?
And so, but the essays, none of the essays concerned the battle. None of them.
Interesting.
That's what really shocked me, was that the essays didn't concern the battle. I mean, again, I get why you want a well-rounded guide, and I don't disagree with that at all. It didn't seem like they really wanted to know if you knew much about the battle. So and it just struck me as odd.
Yeah. So you guys need to design a tour on everything that you never needed to know or want to know. And we'll forget as soon as you leave. And just do a tour that's simply on, okay, so the Secretary of the Interior is this individual.
Right. And you know what we'll do is it'll be on a flatbed truck, and we'll have cots so everybody can fall asleep.
Yeah. So real quick, I'll throw this in here. This is really kind of weird. I just went to post something in the comments, and for me, it said, YouTube rejected your comment. This usually means they think it's spam. So YouTube thinks that I'm spamming my own live stream right now. But what I was trying to type in there is, if anyone has questions about really anything Gettysburg or the guide process or anything like that, fire away, and these guys can answer it. So you mentioned the written portion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, the next part, like you pass this monster of an exam, you're not a guide.
No, not yet.
Okay.
No.
What's the next part?
The next part is a panel interview. You go before licensed battlefield guides and park rangers, and you have a 30-minute interview with them. And if you say and present yourself correctly, the way they feel you should, then you'll be moved on to the next tier. So it's a 5-tiered system. That's tier number 2. Tier number 3 is a field practicum, which is you go out on the field. You give, in the past, it's been you give presentations. Like most common was, here's this section of the battlefield. Tell me what happened here in 5 minutes.
Oh.
Okay. It's teaching you how to be a guide. It's ironing out your rough spots.
Okay.
And then if you move past that and you didn't completely bomb that, you're given a mentor, a current licensed battlefield guide, and they'll prepare you for that oral exam, which is you're driving a car, taking the supervisory ranger around the battlefield and a licensed battlefield guide. You have to hit the time of 2 hours as close or exact as possible, and you have to hit all the points they want you to hit.
Wow.
And you also have to be safe.
Yeah.
You get 2 tries at that. So if you fail the first time, you can come back and do it again. You fail that time, you go back to the beginning. You take the written exam again whenever it's called next. And the 5th one is orientation. That's the 5th tier. So you make it through, you have to be legitimately an orientation to learn how to be guides and how this works and how this process works.
Okay.
So that's this whole system.
I don't want to be negative or like try and introduce doubt. The safety part concerns me for you, Mike. Get out there. Once you get out there and trip on a rock and roll down a hill and fail that part of the exam, that would be tragic.
There goes Lentz rolling down a little route top. There you go, right to the beaver pond. No joke. It's a running joke on the show. They're thinking next time we go out on the get out of the car tour, we're gonna get you a hamster ball. You're gonna be Bubble Boy. And I was like, that's not gonna work because a stiff breeze will have me rolling down the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah, that was a visual, and then there's like 50 of us chasing after him, trying to catch him so he doesn't go too far away.
The Big Hill theme going on in the background.
So, is there any kind of money in being a guide?
No.
Yes, you're doing this because you love it, and if I remember correctly, because I've done a few licensed battlefield guide tours where like had groups come out, and it's like if you have 2 people or if you have 20 people, it's the same price, right?
No.
Yeah. Well, no, it doesn't.
No?
It goes up. If you have a car of like 1 to 6, it's a certain price.
Okay.
And then it's like tiered pricing from there. It's also the same for like time. If you have a standard 2 or 3 hour tour, then every hour after that, it's an additional fee as well. So it's not. There are like bust fees too, there, Matt, because I know he's dealt with that.
Yeah. So I have had to do this when we had the bike tours, and it's like up to 6 people, it's one price. 7 to I want to say 12, 7 to 15, I think is another, and then 16 and above is a bus rate. I know the bus rate because that's what I pay Lewis. It's like $150 for a 2-hour tour. And then so it's like $75 an hour. And then if you wanted to do longer than that, then you got to pay $75 an hour. It's the thing is, so I asked this to a guy who's been doing it for I think 30 years or so, 40 years maybe, yesterday or 2 days ago. And I said, well, like honestly, if I was a guide and I really busted my hump and I really worked it, like realistically, what could I make? And he goes, 55, maybe 60 if you really worked it and maybe supplemented it with some talks and stuff. And I said, okay, but here's the thing. You have to back out your taxes. You have to pay your own health insurance. Sure. You're not an employee. You are a licensee. You're an independent contractor. So it's not a job with the Park Service. It is, you just have the blessing of the Park Service to make money on their land by telling the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. So yeah, if you're going to do it for money, most people don't do it for money. You do it for the love of the game. I'm sure some people do it for the prestige that it gives you. Because but it does give you. I mean, I admire these people because it's hard. It's a lot of I mean, one of the reasons I started doing it as an Ask a Gettysburg Guide is because I always believed that guiding is our guide force is Gettysburg's best kept secret. And so many talented people I've met over the years, and I'm like, damn it, if I get an audience, they've got to know about these people. And so I was very surprised to learn when the show started to take off that a lot of people were like, I had no idea there was such a thing as a guide in Gettysburg. I just thought it was all park rangers no matter where you went, because it's a very unique thing to our park here to have this guide service codified by the Congress. And but I think they do a fantastic job, and I wanted to shine a light on that. So I include them in the show. Also, it makes it easier to not have to do what you do, which is learn a bunch of stuff to do one show. I only learn a little bit. you learn like enough, you know.
So here's a question from Philip Blood, which, by the way, for people who are watching, Philip is an outstanding World War II historian. Is there a rubric that you're judged by at each stage? So how are you judged to be a successful guide at the end of the process? What eventually is the determining factor in saying, okay, yes, you have successfully run through the gauntlet. You are now a licensed guide?
Well, the most apparent thing that indicates that you're a successful guide and that you're going to be a guide is they give you a badge.
Okay.
If they give you the badge, you're good.
But how is it determined? Like what's the dividing line between okay, so for this portion where you go out and you take a guide and a ranger out on a tour, is there a rubric that they have where they're like, okay, this guy checked off all of these boxes, he didn't check these, he got 5 but he missed 2, so we'll go ahead and make him a guide? Or is it just kind of a subjective thing?
I don't know that for sure, because I haven't gone down that road yet, so I don't know if there really is. I've heard rumors that there are some rubrics out there that they do use for certain levels of the exam and through this process, but you don't know that. You don't know that going in. And that's why they assign you a mentor who is a guide. Okay. Because the guide made it through, he or she is helping you to get through.
And then on the written, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't the Park Service and the licensed battlefield guides get together and say, okay, we haven't had this test in 8 years. We need 10 guides, so we're going to take the top 10.
They don't admit to that if that's what they do. No. If you not to shill my channel, but if you go to our channel back in, I want to say it was August, I can't be sure, but if you go back enough, we had someone named Angie Atkinson on, and she's the ranger who basically is in charge of the tests and is in charge of the guides. And I talked to her about the exam and, you know, what people can expect and all that stuff. So a lot of these questions are answered there. But the thing is, they're not, prior to everything, they're very tight-lipped. They don't tell you, there's nothing that you can do to, or maybe I'm wrong on this, but it seems to me, and this is what I glean from other people, there's really nothing you can do to feel adequately prepared for the exam. You're adequately prepared for what you think the exam might be. Okay. But there's no, like I said before, there's no course you can take. No. There's no practice exam to see if you should even waste your $250 signing up for it. There's really nothing. It's like unlike any other licensing process I've ever heard of in my life. Yeah. Like I had an insurance license before, and there was a course. It was an online course that I took, and I took notes, and I really, even though it's so against my nature, I buckled down and I put myself back in school to pass this test and get a license. There's nothing like that for this. You have to be a self-starter, but you also have to be, I think, a little bit of a psychic. You got to be Sylvia Brown or whatever that woman's name was. Oh, she's in the water. You know, like you kind of have to figure out, like, what are they going to do? What are they going to ask you? What are they more likely to ask you about? And so, and then all this, so you're talking about the oral. The one thing a couple of guides have told me is make sure your hands, at least one hand is on the wheel. You don't have to be 10 and 2, but you can't be like, and look over there, because the minute you do that, it's over. Because it's also testing your safety. Like, how safe a driver are you? Do you come to a complete stop in the right place at a stop sign? All that stuff. And there have been stories of people whose exams were abruptly ended because they made what we would think is a simple mistake.
Wow.
But, a simple mistake causes accidents. So
Yeah.
because you think, when you're a guide, when Mike becomes a guide, he's going to be driving other people's cars.
Yeah.
Unless they say, no, I don't want you to, and that's fine. But for the most part, most people let you drive their cars so they can pay attention to what you're pointing out.
Yeah.
So you have to be safe, for property and person.
Yeah.
All right. So let me rapid fire some questions that you guys
Sure.
that popped up here, and we'll just kind of keep these brief. How many years does a guide work after being accepted?
As long as you want to, as long as you keep paying the fee to do it, as long as you have that badge and you want to do it. Once you make it through, there is no recertification process. There's no basically like a apprenticeship. There really isn't. Once you have that badge, now you're in.
There is a recertification process in that you have to pay to have your license every year.
Basically. Yeah, that's it. That's the only recertification.
So if you lose your job and you don't have the extra $350 or whatever, it's $350, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't have that, then go ahead.
How many active guides are there at any given time?
As the man dictates, I would say the most recent number that we had pre-COVID was like in the 150s, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Since COVID, we've probably dipped down to like the 130s and 120s. And as far as active guiding is concerned, I would say it's probably even less than that.
Okay. What's the best way, or how do you hire a licensed battlefield guide? Good question.
I would say the best way is to go and listen to all of our Ask a Gettysburg guides, find the one whose personality you like the most, and then contact me and I'll put you in touch with them.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're too impatient for that, go to the Heritage Center. Just look up the Heritage Center in Gettysburg.
Yeah.
There's also
Heritage Center.
There's a website too, isn't there?
There is.
Well, you can also go to the Association of Licensed Battlefield Guides. That contacts the guides directly. Those are the two ways I would recommend doing it. Try the Heritage Center and the Association of Licensed Battlefield Guides, or do yourself a favor, listen to those shows, find the personality you like, and I'll put you in touch.
Yeah, okay. That's a huge one. I think the biggest way you can do it is to find a guide you like and then to contact them directly, and because then they'll tell you what their schedule is and you can work around that. Whereas if you walk into the Visitor Center, Heritage Center, or anywhere else, you're kind of at the mercy of whoever is there and whatever tour that they would give you. So I would say that contacting the association and then contacting an individual guide is probably the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Through my show. Come on, Mike. What am I paying you for?
Okay,
you did such a great job doing it yourself. I felt anything I added would be superb.
You're supposed to reinforce it. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, JD.
So we had a similar question to this already about like income and things like that. So maybe I'll kind of take this question and modify it a little bit. Do you all know of anybody who is doing this full time?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Eric Lindblade is one of them.
Okay.
And he busts his ass. Like Eric Lindblade, during the season, every time I turn around, that guy is out there giving a tour. And I'm like, didn't I just see you with a different group? Like he's constantly out. He works hard. Now here's the thing. To answer the question, do you have to have other income like in retirement? Most guides seem to be retired. I don't know if statistically that works out, but anecdotally, they all seem to be retired. It is a great retirement gig. You've got the time. You've got the time. You don't need the money. Hopefully you've planned well. So it does skew older. It's a little harder for a younger person. You're going to have to really devote yourself to it or have a good job. And you do this on the weekend. There's plenty of guides. Jim Hessler, for example, he was a weekend warrior. He just retired. So I'm sure he's going to be doing it more often now, but he was a weekend warrior for a long time since he got his license. So it's really, the beauty of it is that you can do it in whichever way it fits into your life. And right now there are no quotas. So they used to have quotas. They suspended them for COVID and they haven't brought them back. I don't know if they plan to bring them back, but at this moment they don't have them. So until they bring quotas back. If you only got like one day a month. I know a guy who comes up on Saturdays and does them. I know a guy who comes down from the Poconos, and I don't know if he still does it but he used to have a furnished apartment that he would rent, and he would just come down and stay for a month in the summer because he was a teacher, or 2 months in the summer, whatever it was. So you make it work the way you make it work.
Because you're an independent contractor. You call your own schedule. And and there's different tiers. You can be a full-time guide or a part-time guide or a weekend guide. So it's all depending. It kind of fits into your schedule.
Okay, cool. So there were a few other questions here about. I'll go ahead and just answer this one because we talked about it already. The yearly renewal. You guys said that you have to pay a yearly fee in order to maintain that. If you let it expire, I'm guessing you have to go back and start the process over in order to get recertified.
I don't know. I don't
know
so.
Answer that question.
I would highly doubt that.
My gosh, I just stumped Mike Lentz. All right. I feel like I've accomplished something. All right, cool. But hey, I'm just going to hit you guys with a few questions of my own, unless some others pop up. But before we go here. So the first time that I went to Gettysburg, I'm the type of person that when I go to a battlefield, I want it to be pristine. Like I want to see it the way that the soldiers saw it.
Me too.
My first trip to Gettysburg was jarring to me because of all of the monuments, especially going up Culp's Hill. I was like, what in the heck is all of this? The more that I've gone to Gettysburg, the more I've come to appreciate the monuments and memorials. It's actually helped me to navigate the battlefield a little bit better. And then learning about the history of monumentation. Tim Smith on the Adams County Historical Society's YouTube page has Monuments Monday. So I love that. I'm learning all kinds of new things. Just kind of curious, what's your favorite monument or memorial on the battlefield? Okay.
I'm going to answer this one. The 1st Vermont Brigade. The 1st Vermont Brigade was not heavily engaged in the battle, but like a lot of these veterans who came back to memorialize the battlefield, Gettysburg became a symbol of their entire war service. The 1st Vermont Brigade was a very good brigade, but at Gettysburg it suffered one casualty. And so it's not heavily engaged. It's their monument's on the reverse towards the Tytown Road. It's kind of on the east slope of Little Round Top as you're going out on Wright Avenue. And not many people go out to see it. It's a beautiful monument. It was designed by Charles Wellington Reed, a Medal of Honor recipient for his action at Gettysburg, where he was the battery bugler for Bigelow's battery, the 9th Massachusetts. And he became a sketch artist after the war, and he sketched the lion for the monument. And the veterans would tell you with their monument that all this writing on the side here is telling you what battles they were in and what they did at Gettysburg, which is they marched 30 miles in a day to get to the battlefield. But why they chose the lion is because they were placed right there, refusing the flank of the federal line. No, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain is not the only one who did that. Refusing the flank of the federal line, just in case Robert E. Lee did a flanking maneuver and went around to the right, around Round Top, to get into the rear of the Union Army. This one, they said, if the Confederates had done that, they would have found a lion in their path. And so this 1st Vermont Brigade, that's my favorite monument on the battlefield at Gettysburg.
The fact that you knew all that is ridiculous. It is. Why do I have it in my head that if we were to go to Mike's house, he's got like a model of every single monument, and it's laid out in his house exactly as it is on the Gettysburg battlefield.
He's got the battlefield. You can't go through his living room because it's just a monument map of the battlefield.
Yes.
Yeah. But he's only got 1,200. So he's almost there.
What about you, Matt?
I actually have a couple for different reasons. The 11th Mississippi monument I like because my friend Bob Steenstra was giving a tour to it was either a senator or a congressman from Mississippi. This was back, I would believe, in the late 90s. And he told him the story of the 11th Mississippi, who, what was it, Mike? They ended up with 53 men by the end of the battle.
Yeah.
Right?
And the company that featured all Ole Miss students, 100% casualties.
100% Company F, is that what that was?
Wow. Yes, it was the Oxford Greys, I think is what they were called.
Right. Completely wiped out. The whole regiment started with, I think, 300 something. Is that something around there? And by the end of the battle, and they were in Pickett's charge, they had about 53, 57, something like that. So 53, I think, is the answer. Anyway, so I like that because I know the story of how it came about. And so he gives this tour to this senator or congressman from Mississippi. And, he was an old guy at the time, so he was still very much ingrained in this lost cause stuff, and not ingrained in it, but you know what I mean? It was ingrained in him. And he was very moved, and frankly, removing which side you think was right or which was wrong. These are young men snuffed out early in life and in a horrific way. And it is sad, and it is a waste. And so, he hears the story of the 11th Mississippi and is moved, I believe, to tears. And he just vows right then and there on the spot to Bob that these boys are going to have a monument to them. And I believe it was in the year 2000 that monument finally went up with a kind donation from a famous author whose name escapes me, John Grisham. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to be anonymous, but somehow that's known. So, so that's one of them. And also the 11th Mississippi, the monument, it's one guy, he's holding the flag and he's reaching behind him as if to say, come on, there it is. Thank you. And I believe the story to that is when he did that, he saw no one was behind him. He was the last one. So it's just sad. So that's a new one. That's a new one. I think it was 2000 that was put up, Mike. Is that right?
Yeah, and it had a lot of support from a particularly influential senator.
Yeah,
to get it through, because there's a moratorium on further monuments there at Gettysburg.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And James just had my other one is the North Carolina monument.
Yeah, that was gonna be one of mine.
Yeah. So that one. Gutzon Borglum did that. So he also did Mount Rushmore. So there's that history to it. But also the looks on their faces, you go and you look at their faces, and these guys are about to go across that field. One guy's pointing as if to say, you want me to go over there? And you could just see like the humanity of what they're about to do. I think one of them's wounded, it's just, there's something about that. Like it's like an action frozen in time. So that's another one that I like. And there was a third one that I had that totally escapes me right now. Oh, the 7th New Jersey. I like that one. I'm from New Jersey, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, had some men from my county. And it's a giant bullet. That's what that is, for those of you who thought it was obscene before when Mike put it out in the shot there. So yeah, and so I always thought that one was cool. Because when we would take people on bike tours, the guides would ride by and they go, if you look at that monument, you can get an idea of what a Civil War bullet looked like. And one little girl asked, how did they carry them? They look so heavy. And we had to explain it wasn't that big. It was just that shape. But she was like 11. Okay.
I would go off of Matt there too. This is probably one of my favorites as well. And I have a personal story with that. When I first came to Gettysburg, I went around the field. I was jarring, just like you were there, JD. So many monuments. And you look around the battlefield around that area, including Project Pass. He said the 73rd New York's over there with the firemen. And
the firemen, yeah.
Amazing statues, amazing monuments. And New Jersey chooses a bullet. And so my first thought was of derision. I said, really, New Jersey? That's all you could afford? was a bullet.
No, you're missing the point.
Yes. And so what happened was I found out about the story. The monument is placed on where their commander, Colonel Louis Francine, was mortally wounded.
Oh, wow.
And so if you go around and you look at the monument on all sides, it tells you about their war service. It tells you right here is where Colonel Francine fell. And they're letting you know, this is the echo of their voices. They're letting you know that our service mattered, not only here at Gettysburg, but in the war. And so from that day on, this sits on my desk as a reminder to take these monuments seriously, because a lot of them are the echoes of the veterans themselves trying to tell you a story.
Nice. I would say for me, there's a couple. Everybody likes the Irish Brigade monument with the
Yes.
Irish wolfhound on it.
Yeah.
Another one that I like is actually on Culp's Hill, which, again, as I said in the beginning, when I first went to Gettysburg, was quite jarring to me. And that's this one here, the
Yes.
one for the
Yes.
78th and the 102nd.
Great
One of the, for people who don't know, Culp's Hill, one of the big things on that part of the battlefield was there was this general by the name of Pat Green. He was the oldest general on the battlefield, right, that day?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
correct?
he's not. The
Oh,
oldest
he's
general
not?
is William Billy Smith, Confederate general. He's the oldest Union.
Oldest general in the Union Army.
Okay, oldest
Confederate
Union
generals
general.
don't count, Mike. Don't be such a nerd.
But anyway, he had his men build these breastworks, and I don't know if you can really see it on this photo, but there's this lion that is integrated into the breastworks, and I just love
I
that
can see
moment.
him, but it's hard to make out.
It
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
it gives a good representation of what those breastworks look like.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
I came to kind of appreciate like the artistic value of these monuments that were put up.
Can I give you another good one?
Yeah, sure.
That a lot of people probably don't know because it's off the beaten path, but it's one of my favorites, and I'll tell you why. It's the 93rd Pennsylvania.
Oh,
And
yes.
I love this. So they have two monuments. One is up on Sedgwick Avenue, and it's rather plain because that's what the veterans put up initially, and that's that's what they could afford. So the veterans, by the way, that's who put a lot of these monuments up, were the veterans themselves.
Yep.
And so they would get a collection or whatever. And sometimes you'll see there's two monuments for a regiment. One's kind of humble, and the other one is a little more ornate. The one that's more ornate has money from the state behind it. And so it's nicer. Now, the 93rd, so you find the first one easily on Sedgwick Avenue, but that's not the one I'm talking about. You have to go west of Sedgwick Avenue into, I don't even know, does the lane have a name? There's a driveway off of, actually, I think it's an old farm lane. This one here. There's a driveway off of Wheatfield Road. If you go down there, just be mindful that Park Service people might live there, or someone might be there in residence for something. So don't go up to the house and be a jerk. But this is just off of to the side of the driveway. And what's cool about this is the boulder it rests on originally had, because this was, I believe, their advanced position. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that was their advanced position.
Okay. So the boulder originally had carving in it to indicate that this was the advanced position of the 93rd PA, and it has the division and the corps and all that other stuff in it. Then they got some money, and they got this nice new monument. You see that bronze plaque on the front? That means that it was paid for with money from the state of Pennsylvania, and they put that monument up. Well, so they had, the rock it didn't come out of the ground all perfectly flat like that. They had to split it. And so they did, and put the monument on it, and they just tossed the other chunks aside. So you'll see in the area around the 93rd, in fact, go way, way back in our YouTube channel, you'll see I have a video there of this. There's chunks of rock just scattered about the monument. that actually have the carvings in them. So you can
Oh,
go and
wow.
look, and you'd have to look upside down sometimes to see it because they just kind of flipped it over and tossed it aside. But you can see the rest of the boulder and the carvings obviously still in the rock. So
That's
I
cool.
love
I
that
love stuff like
because,
that.
huh?
I said I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
So do I. It's like stuff that's in plain sight that, I don't know. I've seen that monument a few times because I went up there and explored, but I never looked that closely because you're looking at the monument. You're not looking at the boulders on the ground to the side
Right.
of the monument, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
when somebody told me that, I had to run out there and see, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's the coolest thing!" So yeah, little things like that, and that's why we do these little things we call get out of the car tours. And it was because of things like that, like discoveries like that I could not see from the paved roads.
Sure.
I realized I have to get out and explore my battlefield because this is my history here. And there's so much more to it. And so we started doing these free tours to bring people out and do that. Harder to do nowadays because the park is restricting people's access. But in the old days when you could, freely roam your national parks, we could go and see stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. I saw the question pop up here. Yeah.
The PA monument?
The PA monument is the one
Yeah.
you're talking about. The big domed
Yeah.
monument. Yeah.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, since the battle took place on Pennsylvania soil, they got the big monument.
Right.
So that's probably the one. Could he be talking about the New York monument on
the 44th New York on Little Round Top also
Little
has
Round
some
Top
staircase
also
to an
has some stairs
observation
to go to the top.
deck, yeah.
Probably
But he
talking
says
about
the word, he says huge.
Yeah, that's
The
got to
PA
be the
monument
Pennsylvania.
is huge.
So
Yeah.
it's got to be the Pennsylvania monument. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So one last question before I let you guys go. I've ate up a bunch of your time already. So
Got all the time in the world.
so I mean, we're all a bunch of history nerds, and I know that Gettysburg nerds in particular. But I'm assuming that every once in a while you kind of drift out of your lane and kind of study some other things. So when you're not neck deep in Civil War stuff, what is capturing your interest, or maybe what is capturing your interest right now outside of Civil War material?
Okay. Do you mind if I take that, Matt?
By all means.
Since the 250th is coming up, Rev War has really captured my attention. And getting really deep into that. That was a lot of focus when I was in college, was an early American Republic, and so Rev War and things like that. So that's kind of my escape. You have to have an escape valve. You deal with this enough, it can really mess with you. So you've got to have something that has a release. And so for me, it's just going into Rev War and going into the founding of the country.
All right, cool. Matt, what about you?
I think you just made me realize, Mike, I always said I don't read about much else because I'm preparing to take the guide exam, and I don't want to confuse myself with other battles or something and say, but now that I'm free from that, I'm going to take that under advisement, and I am going to start reading more about the Revolutionary War because I haven't done that since I was a kid. But typically for me, it's the Little Bighorn. And I'm fascinated by Western history. The outlaws and just the whole westward expansion is just fascinating to me. I just can't imagine it. Those are probably the thing. I like the 19th century. I don't like anything before the automobile. I'm okay with. And maybe the early automobile, but they're still using horses like in Big Jake, That's the other thing I love is Hollywood history. I love films and filmmaking, and Hollywood history is also fascinating to me. But yeah, so like that's pretty much it. Yeah.
And JD, do you mind if I say something kind of on my end as far as closing is concerned?
Please.
For me, I think I'm doing this because I want to be a steward of the story of Gettysburg. This story is much bigger than me, and people have been telling this story before I came around, and they'll be telling the story, God willing, after I'm gone. And I want to be a steward and be faithful to the memory of the men and the people who lived through this, who fought there, and to tell their story, to make that connection, to be that interpreter of the past to people in the present. It's a huge responsibility, and it's something I don't take lightly. I was fortunate to pass the written exam. I still don't understand how. 85.98%, and I still managed to get through in the top 20. But there's a long road ahead of me. But for me, this is something that means a lot more to me than any money I could ever make, any prestige I could ever gain. Because the responsibility of being a guide at Gettysburg goes far deeper and is far more important than anything I could come up from a self-interested standpoint.
Hey, I can't think of a better way to close things out than that.
I'm just teasing you, Mike. That was very nice.
All right. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and helping us to kind of figure this out and learn a little bit more about it. I'm going to have you guys back on, and maybe we'll pick some specific topics related to Gettysburg.
Yeah. This was actually fun compared to like being the guy asking the questions. I really like this. I'll do this anytime you want.
Yeah, cool. And Mike, good luck to you going forward with the guide exam. Wish you the best. In some way, because in another way, if you pass, then I got to start paying you to go out and take that on the battlefield. So that's going to kind of stink.
But if he passes, you'll hear him a lot more on my show because he'll now be able to be a guide.
We'll be on the Ask Gettysburg guide.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't wait for that.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So there you go. Again, the YouTube channel and podcast is Addressing Gettysburg. You can find it anywhere where you find podcasts. And again, it's on the YouTube channel. One of the best resources out there for anything concerning the Battle of Gettysburg. And as we kind of mentioned, all roads lead to Gettysburg. So when you learn about the battle, you're learning a lot more about the Civil War at large. So if you have an interest even in just the Civil War in general, that is a great resource to fill your ears as you're going from point A to point B in your car. So anyway, thanks for hanging out with us this evening. And we'll have another one of these live streams coming up pretty soon. I think maybe on Monday. But anyway, be sure to subscribe to Addressing Gettysburg on YouTube. And we'll catch you later.